I'm David Caputo, Professor of Political Science at Pace University, and I'd like to welcome you to the Road to the White House Massive Open Online Course, or more commonly known as the MOOC. Pleased you're with us. Hopefully you've found the preceding lectures to be of interest and the ones going forward also. So let me start today with something a little different, something that you probably haven't heard so much about as a result of Iowa. And here what I want to focus on is really what the impact of the Iowa caucuses likely mean for the two political parties, for the Republicans and the Democrats. Okay? We've talked in the prior lecture about what it meant for the candidates, but let's talk for a minute about what it means for the parties. First of all, for the Republicans, record high turnout. Many people would argue that's very good for the Republicans. It gives them a strong base in Iowa going forward into the fall. Iowa is usually a competitive state. The problem is that nearly 2/3 of the voters in Iowa that turned out for the caucuses have to be seen as anti-establishment. Trump is not liked by the establishment of the Republican Party. Cruz is disliked probably as much, if not more. And then you have Ben Carson, who many people fail to take seriously. Nonetheless, he still got 9 to 10% of the vote in the balloting. You add those three together, and you're well over 60% in terms of the way people are looking at the party. So if I were a member of the Republican Party, especially an establishment leader, I'd be very concerned about, hey, wait a minute, what is happening and why is this happening? So now the issue becomes why the poor performances of our three governors, one ex-governor and two active governors. I can't explain that in Iowa. We'll see how they do in New Hampshire, but unless one of those three candidates emerges, the Republicans may have to make a decision that Marco Rubio is the establishment candidate. And I would argue, if I were Rubio, as I mentioned in the prior lecture, I would not want to take that mantle right now. I'd want to wait till the fewer numbers were in the race. So the party has to be concerned about anti-establishment vote. Party also has to be concerned about where does the Trump and Cruz vote go. If Trump continues to falter, does that vote go to Rubio or does that vote go to Trump? To Cruz, or vice versa. If Cruz fumbles, is that vote going to go to Trump, or is it going to go to Rubio, or is it going to go to another candidate? Now, the interesting thing about New Hampshire coming up is that this is more or less the last stand for the governors. If they're not, especially Jeb Bush, if Jeb Bush is not able to poll well into the double digits, he will, for all intents and purposes, I think, have to wrap his campaign up. And same for Kasich. Christie is arguing that he will do well in New Hampshire, and perhaps he will. But what is well? Well, well might be a third place finish, a strong fourth place finish, 10 to 12%. But it's unlikely that the three of them would poll at 15 to 20% each, given Trump's lead and given Cruz and Rubio. So I think the party has to come to the conclusion that it has a very long process ahead. And this is something they wanted to avoid, as the problem they had in 2012 with Governor Romney, where he had a prolonged battle which weakened him, sapped resources, sapped organization, built tensions up. The Republicans would prefer to get this over with. Okay? Now, it's going to be very difficult for them to do so, I would argue. Cruz will do well in some of the southern states. Trump may do well. So you could end up with a prolonged battle. And the last thing that the Republicans want at this point is a convention that has to decide if none of the candidates have a majority going in. And that would make things very difficult. Remember that after March 15th, the Republican primaries are largely winner take all. So that will help the candidates that are in the strongest by the 15th. All right? So let's talk for a minute about the Democrats. As I mentioned, Sanders' near win in Iowa is actually a win for him. Clearly, it's a win also for Mrs. Clinton, but certainly not at the same category. So what is this saying to a party, okay, that is trying to establish a candidate in terms of Mrs. Clinton who has the experience, in their estimation, and the political toughness to be able to endure and prevail in the fall? Well, it means that they're going to have could have a very long battle here. And what that means for the party is clearly this weakens, but more importantly, the more Sanders and Clinton battle each other, the harder and more difficult it is going to be for them to reconcile with the ultimate winner. Not only do they have to reconcile, they have to move their supporters with them. And it's going to be much more difficult for the supporters to move. If you watched the speeches last night in the Sanders camp when he congratulated Mrs. Clinton, there were boos. Okay? Usually boos are saved for your real political enemy. So I think already you can see some of the conclusions here. Plus, a large part of the Sanders contingency are younger voters, and we know younger voters don't vote in the fall, don't vote in the general election. Perhaps they will with Sanders, but how much of the support will carry over to Clinton? So I think the Democrats have a very, very tough road ahead. The convention, you could end up, I mean, if they split the vote going forward 50-50, you will have a contested election in the convention. I think another thing that's important for the Democratic Party is that they not show favoritism to either candidate. And I think already the Sanders camp feels, and in fact they have shown favoritism to Secretary Clinton. So I think the Democratic leadership has to be very careful going forward. So I think the Democrats as a party have a difficult time ahead. So the future, the next three events will be key: New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. If you have one person who's able to run that table in either party, then they're going to be in a strong position. But March 1st and March 15th, mark those days down. Those are likely to be the days where we get a much clearer picture of who's going to prevail, both party-wise and individually. So March 1st and March 15th. Otherwise, if we remain stalemated and everyone, the candidates are splitting votes and so forth, it's very likely that we could have convention floor fights at both conventions in the nominating process. So, thank you.